Humanitarian appeal has fallen to a record low.
That was the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator Joyce Msuya. Ministers from 5 Arab countries have met the Secretary General of the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Hussein al-Sheikh, to discuss the situation in the Gaza Strip. In a joint statement issued by the Egyptian presidency, Hussein al-Sheikh, as well as the heads of the Egyptian, Jordanian, Qatari, and Saudi diplomatic services, and the Emirati Minister of State for International Cooperation, called for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire, increased humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip, and the opening of all crossings between the Zionist entity and Gaza. They called for the removal of obstacles to the delivery of aid to Gaza and for full support for UNRWA. Officials rejected any attempt to displace Palestinians from their land or to liquidate the Palestinian cause, urging the Zionist entity to put an end to all unilateral measures that jeopardize the chances of achieving a just peace, including the construction of settlements. And now the Palestinian Foreign Ministry has denounced the plundering of vast tracts of Palestinian land by Zionist settlers or settler militias in the locality of Al-Khadr in the occupied West Bank in favor of colonial expansion. In a statement relayed by the Palestinian news agency Wafa, the Palestinian diplomacy condemned the spoliation by settlers of a Palestinian house in the village of Taqu, southeast of the town of Bethlehem, following a series of attacks on Palestinians. And the media office in Gaza has said that the Zionist occupation army has deliberately killed 13 Palestinian patients in the last few hours inside the Al-Shifa medical complex, depriving them of medicines, food, and oxygen. In a message posted on social networks, the office reported that the hospital's intensive care wards contained around 22 patients in urgent need of intensive medical care. It explained that the Zionist occupation army intentionally killed 13 patients by depriving them of medicines, electricity, and oxygen since occupying the compound for the 4th consecutive day. Still in the Palestinian file, several Palestinian civilians, including 3 children, were killed and injured in a Zionist occupation airstrike early today, northeast of Rafah city, south of the Gaza Strip, according to local sources, as the savage and barbaric Zionist aggression against the defenseless Palestinian population on the besieged enclave enters its 168th day. Said Bougazi has more details in this report.
The sources reported that the occupation forces targeted the residential building in the neighborhood of Nasr, northeast of Rafah, resulting in the killing of 8 citizens and the injury of others. The same sources added that among the victims were 3 children and 3 women, with some of the injured being in critical condition. In the related context, Zionist fighter jets bombed a house on Tarazi Street in Deir el-Balah in central Gaza. Simultaneously, occupation forces continue their invasion of the Shifa medical complex in Gaza City, deploying dozens of tanks and vehicles in its vicinity. Furthermore, the occupation warplanes conducted intense airstrikes on residential buildings in the area. The Palestinian death toll in the Gaza Strip has risen to approximately 32,000 martyrs and more than 74,000 injured since the launch of the savage Zionist aggression, the majority of whom are women and children, in addition to thousands of victims still trapped under the rubble. The ongoing aggression against the Gaza Strip, now in its 168th day, has forced more than 85% of Gaza's citizens into internal displacement amidst a suffocating blockade on most food, clean water and medicines. Meanwhile, over 60% of the Gaza Strip's infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed, according to the United Nations.
Malnutrition and dehydration have claimed the life of a new victim, a 2-month-old infant in Gaza, the scene of a genocidal war since October 7, 2023, bringing to 28 the number of deaths due to food shortages in the besieged enclave, the media have reported. More details in this report by our colleague Saad Bougazi.
According to the media, the efforts of doctors at Kamal Adwan Hospital failed to save the life of Palestinian baby Dalia due to health complications resulting from a lack of milk in the light of the Zionist siege on the north of the Gaza Strip since last October. Dalia is not the only one to die of malnutrition. 27 Palestinians, including infants, have died in recent weeks as a result of food shortages in northern Gaza, where the inhabitants face a shortage of food, water, and infant formula.
And the leaders of the 27 meeting in a summit in Brussels have called in a joint declaration for an immediate humanitarian pause in Gaza and urged the Zionist entity not to launch a ground operation in Rafah. The European Council calls for an immediate humanitarian pause leading to a durable ceasefire and the provision of humanitarian aid, according to the text, which also calls on the Zionist entity not to carry out any ground operation in Rafah in the south of the Gaza Strip, where hundreds of thousands of Gazans have taken refuge. The United States, which has blocked calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, will finally submit its draft resolution to the UN Security Council today, insisting on the need for such an immediate ceasefire, announced U.S. spokesperson. After a series of consultations with the Security Council, we will submit this resolution to a vote on Friday, said Nate Evans, spokesman for the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And China has indicated that it supports the efforts of the UN Security Council aimed at putting an end to the ongoing Zionist aggression against the Palestinians. The United States has already vetoed several Security Council resolutions calling for a ceasefire. After Washington's last veto at the end of February, U.S. diplomats drafted an alternative text based on the objective of a 6-week truce. And the Polisario Front has welcomed the decisive progress made in the recognition of the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination following the publication by the Court of Justice of the European Union of the General Council's conclusions on the EU-Moroccan fisheries agreements and the origin of Sahrawi agricultural products. Said Boughazi has more.
The Polisario Front insisted that there is no discussion about the admissibility of the Sahrawi people's legal actions. In this respect, it stated that the General Council takes up the arguments of the Polisario Front on the right to self-determination and the Sahrawi people's right to permanent sovereignty over natural resources. Concerning the issue of the origin of agricultural products, the Polisario Front pointed out that the General Council had concluded that given the separate and distinct status of the Sahrawi territory by virtue of the right to self-determination, melons and tomatoes from the territory of Western Sahara must be labeled with the country of origin indication reflecting their origin from that territory. These products may not indicate Morocco as their country of origin. With regard to the EU-Morocco fisheries agreement, the Polisario Front pointed out that the General Council had concluded that the appeal by the European Council and Commission should be dismissed. In its view, by failing to consider the territory of Western Sahara and the waters adjacent to it separate and distinct from Morocco, the EU has failed to respect the right to self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. This situation is therefore contrary to the principle of self-determination enshrined by the court in its landmark judgment of 21st December 2016, concluded the Polisario Front.
And without further ado, the first part of a series, we will listen now to the first part of a series of broadcasts tracing through history the various stages of the spread of Islam throughout Africa. With this, we come to the end of it. We'll meet again tomorrow. Thank you, and Sahaf Torkom.